She's gonna be late, I think, right?
She'll be late. Laura Hatfield won't be with us at all. I think that's accurate.
Councilmember Masadi, hello.
Council member and Judge Murphy, we acknowledged
We
y'all
are now
last
live
week.
on YouTube.
We acknowledged you all last week for the unveiling. I don't think y'all are on the line yet, so congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.
I haven't
Both
been
great.
down at night yet. I think that's the time to go see them, isn't it?
And absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good people, in regards and respect to everybody's time, we are going to get started. Welcome to we are nearing the grand finale here of this law enforcement justice and accountability subcommittee of the Mayor's Commission on Racial Equality. Let me start by reading the COVID statement. Due to COVID-19 pandemic and the state of emergency, this meeting is being held via live video teleconference pursuant to 2020 Senate Bill 150 and in accordance to KRS 61.826, because it is not feasible to offer a primary physical location for this meeting. Want everyone to know that we welcome each of you that are with us on YouTube Live. There is a comment section there for you that we do pay attention to and monitor, as well as you can find us at Racial Justice email at racialjustice@lexingtonky.gov. Those comments will be and have been monitored by us, and we will continue to do so. We are nearing the time of nearing the end time of collecting data for recommendations, and so the 27th will be the last time that we can consider any input for recommendations, as we will be finishing up those this week. I will need to enter, and so I wanted to make sure our public knew of that. Motion for our Friday, in which you should be a receipt. Would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Thursday, actually.
What's that?
That was our Thursday meeting.
I'm sorry, Thursday the 20th. Thank you. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes from Thursday, August the 20th.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in the second, moved by Sister Gunther, second by Chief Maynard. Is there any question? Hearing no question, all in favor signify by aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Motion carries. So, good people, we had some conversation and some recognition and acknowledgement. Chief Maynard let us know that they are busy there at LPD. Want to express appreciation to LPD for the work they're doing. And I want to unfortunately rehearse some comments that I made probably last Monday following an unfortunate weekend that was in the lines of after we had a young man that was shot, killed on Newtown Pike that was headed to Louisville University, we're told. We know. This past weekend, another young man that was a senior, one of our academies here in town. Unfortunate occurrence at our mall Sunday, and then last night an unfortunate occurrence, all of which has caused us to lose the gifts that were in those respective young people. So while we continue this work, this track that we're working on to identify the growth opportunities, reference systemic racism in law enforcement and in justice systems, just again encourage us and remind us that as communities, as houses of faith, as parents and grannies and aunties and mentors and advocates and instructors and human service providers, whatever our role is, we also have a responsibility and a need to continue to lift up our communities and our young people, encourage them, provide sound and salient guidance for them, and help them to be able to deal with the stressors and the trauma and the issues that are swirling in their minds and in their lives and in the homes and in our communities. So we will continue to go down this track and do this work, and we will be aware of all those venues that we can insert ourselves to improve the human condition. Heart goes out to those families and communities. Today, our agenda will be as follows. We are going to look at recommendations, the good work, the real good work that has been going on. I don't know what I'm going to do after this committee is done if I don't hear from Judge Jennifer Kaufman about 12 times a day. But I think I'll get by. And the others that have been hard at work this weekend. It was just hyper mode. I was walking through Home Depot talking to Diane Minifield. I have confounded people with these DAC boxes that I gave this example. I never knew a grid could be so confounding, but it did the job. So, but listen, really excited, thankful, grateful for the work, the passion that folks are putting into this, because you do know this is really literally a matter of life and death. This work is, and that's being reflected in the efforts that are being put forth. So we're going to look at some of the manifestations of those efforts today. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to look at prioritizing our recommendations. So we're going to look at our recommendations that Judge Kaufman has done good work in synthesizing them into a document. Hopefully you've all had an opportunity to look at that document for law enforcement and for the justice system. It is your work and your sentiment that has been reduced and summarized for the purposes of us prioritizing today. Then after we've done that, giving thumbs up, thumbs down, try to prioritize, we're going to do a gap analysis. What are we missing? Are there some components that, if we're going to set these recommendations forward to the mayor and to the super commission, what are things that must be in there that we need to do? And if there is a gap, we're going to identify a way and a deadline to get those gaps filled. And so we're going to move forward in that fashion. So I'm going to share screen, but if it's not effective, if it's so small that it's not effective, then there's really no need of me doing it. I hope everybody has the document before them. Welcome back, Sister Fogel. If anybody has that document before them, if everybody has it before them, that would likely be best. So how does that share screen? Can you see that, or is it so we're good there? Okay. So we're going to look at, these were categorized, just a bit of an overview. You will note that Kaufman and myself identified 4 large categories that we've identified is what these recommendations are under. The first one is police discipline. We toured with police discipline / citizens input, but you'll see citizens input prominent there. The second category will be monitoring and accountability. The third category, large category, is going to be training, recruitment, and hiring. And then the fourth and final category that we have is structure and staffing, reference law enforcement. I thought this, and tell me if we're wrong as we prioritize and look at the recommendations. It seems that it may be a foregone conclusion because the beginning work and it's the most pervasive work and it's the most resounding that our work around police discipline is going to rise as a priority. Civilian input and the collective bargaining agreement has risen as a priority. Is that an accurate assessment? And I will consider your silence to be compliance.
I would also point out that in police discipline, the first 5 recommendations all relate to citizen input. And I don't know how the feeling is about whether you want to include all of those as one recommendation under citizen input, or whether there's somebody on the committee who disagrees with one of those recommendations. So we need to hear some feedback on that.
Sister Basadi? You're muted, sis.
This to me is the most, can you hear me now? This is the most important component that I think that needs to go first, but I think I would certainly emphasize that the citizen involvement, I mean, number one, and then have the other principles underneath of it. And I would even go further to suggest how this is made up, whether it's made up of 3 citizens, whether it's made up of 3 FOP members. I think we have to be very specific as how this is going to be made up, the number that's going to be on this panel and who it is comprised of. Because I don't want an imbalance. I don't want where there's maybe 5 from the police field and maybe only 3 citizens and maybe 2 from someone else. I'm just using the number 9 as a suggestion. I think there needs to be an odd number, but I think it needs to be, each group needs to have an equal amount of representation.
Diane Minifield wrote this. Well, how would you respond to her, Ms. Minifield?
And keep it, as you respond, Sister Minifield, keep in mind that this is what you're looking at is an abridged version.
Right.
I promise you, Diane's got an unabridged version. It's
That is so true. And
Yeah.
I would assume that Ms. Masadi is talking about our recommendation to add some general public citizenry to the review council.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, and it does.
I just wanted to
indicate-
have equal weight. That's my concern. I want to have equal weight and not have a disproportionate number.
Right, and I assume that right now there is 7 and it's statutorily defined,
Right.
who those 7 members are. And our recommendation was to add 2 or 3 lay people, to that list. And right now, the way that review board statutorily is defined, that it says 7 members, 6 shall be assistant chiefs, commanders, or captains. 1 member should be a member covered by this agreement appointed by the lodge president for a 2-year term. The lodge president may appoint an alternative to serve in said capacity. The chairperson of the, Uh-huh.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's CBA. It's got to be clarified just because statutorily means that we'd have to go to Frankfurt.
Oh, okay.
CBA.
It's the CBA. It's correct. It is defined under the CBA agreement. And so that's how they come up with the 7. And then our recommendation was to add at least 2 or 3 citizens to that group. So that would take it to 9. I agree that it probably should be an odd number, and I agree that they should be voters. And now whether or not we should add, 7 more members so it can balance out, I don't necessarily know if I think that. I think that Melissa, in her conversation with Judge Murphy, I'm sorry, in her conversation with the city law department is where we came up with this 2 or 3 type of a number. So I'm gonna let Judge Murphy interject as well while we're having this conversation.
And honestly, I agree with you, Judge Masadi. It should not be, if the CBA would need to be changed whole in whole, meaning instead of the 7 being defined as 5 and 1 and so on and so on. I do think that there should be some sort of balance to it. I believe that yes, it needs to we can either change the CBA to be 9, and once we change that to 9, then divide those numbers how we feel fit or see fit. So whether that's 3 citizens, 3 FOP, and then 3 from the administrators from the chief's office. That works fine as well. I do believe that it can't just be one citizen who feels like that they're being overrun by either side. So I agree with you on that assessment. And honestly, I don't have a thought on that, but that was my recommendation to Diane to add that portion in because it was something that can be done, changed. And I shouldn't say, I know I said CBA. The government cannot unilaterally, but that is something that is in negotiations as far as the CBA. But the KRS, we all know, is not something that LFUCG can make any changes to. So I hope that clears everything up.
And that designation is not defined in the KBA. I mean, in the Kentucky Revised Statute. So the only place that it would need to be amended is the CBA. And I agree with Masadi as well that if we're going to submit this recommendation, we need to be as specific as possible, but we all understand that it will be a negotiation tool because as the whole CBA has been negotiated, that will also be a negotiation. We may not end up with 5, if we request 5, because it will be a negotiated element.
I have a comment and a question. First of all, in paragraph 7 or section 7 that we're looking at right now, I think it's better to have a specific number rather than saying 2 or 3. And that's my comment. My question is, Council Member Masadi, what do you think about what Judge Murphy said about 3 citizens, 3 from the FOP, and 3 from the chief's office?
I completely agree. I think that's the way to go. And it gives everyone the same amount of weight. And I think that to me is the most fair.
I have a question. I wonder if that's how it would be perceived that the FOP is separate from the chief's office because they're all police. So, that may,
that's a good question. I guess maybe Commander Maynard can answer that. I mean, they all belong, all the police basically belong to the FOP. Still seems like it's a little heavier weighted, but I don't know. I can't answer that.
I think the clarification would be that currently there's 1 FOP representative that's on the board and the rest are command staff. You're taking away a large voting voice from the command staff that's a little bit more administratively focused than an FOP focus. But if that's your recommendation, that's your recommendation.
Well,
What do you think, Chief
that's
Maynard?
good insight, brother.
Well,
There is. I'm going to lean more towards that there's still administrative and managerial control If you're giving more votes to the FOP, in my opinion, that takes away some of the managerial control of our agency to the FOP.
I am not in favor of giving the FOP any more votes than they already have.
And
And I-
right now,
But-
they only have one.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah.
They don't have it.
I really thought when we were going to make recommendations to add people to this, that they would all be laypersons. Because if you're gonna, you've got, 7 right now. I mean,
And I understand what you're saying, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Denotra, but I think
No, you're
the
good.
issue is that this has to be, we know this has to be a negotiation. So if we go in there saying that we're gonna leave the FOP at 1, add 3 citizens, and leave the chief staff at 4 or 5, we're hamstrung to a certain extent. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think that was the thought behind expanding. But I do agree with Chief Maynard that it probably should not be the FOP even with everyone else. But again,
That's
I'm
gonna be
open.
modified, I'm believing.
Okay.
well,
Mhm.
my concern is that when don't make this an exercise in fruition. If you start adding, like, well, we it's going to be negotiation. We just say we want to add 3 lay people and not add more FOP. I mean, then we're right back where we began, which is it's weighted one way or the other. The whole point, was to have more transparency, was to have more input and insight other than law enforcement. But that's just
This
my
is-
opinion, which is,
Well-
everybody has one.
And a salient one. Judge Scorsone, I think you want to weigh in?
Well, I would think that perhaps, our focus ought to be citizen involvement. And that we just focus in on that and let the police and the city worry about the internal politics, about, how to deal with the FOP and the leadership. But that our focus should be just on the public involvement, and that it's always good to have a model that you can say, hey, we should do this according to another existing model. We know that in the judges' review of judicial conduct, 30%, basically, a third, is public individuals that are scrutinizing judicial conduct. So if we say that 30% of that body ought to be public, then we've got something we can point to and zero in just on the public participation rather than try to tell the city how to deal with the FOP. Just my take.
And I think it may be helpful for us to understand at what juncture does this disciplinary review board even get involved, because they're not automatic, at any point. And the complaint is filed, it goes through the public integrity unit, and then the public integrity unit makes a recommendation to the chief. And if the chief doesn't accept that recommendation, or the charged officer doesn't accept the discipline that the chief wants, then it can go to a disciplinary review board, which is where we're talking about right now. But I believe in section 3, it says at the discretion of the chief. So it still isn't automatic. So if it does go to this disciplinary review board, it's already went through one step, and this is the next step. And then it doesn't stop there either. So we look at the fact that if there's no resolution at this disciplinary review board, then it's going to go to the Urban County Council. So, so I think we need to look at it where it is in the process and be mindful of that, because it's not the end all be all, and it's not guaranteed. So, and Chief Maynard can weigh in on that for me as well.
You're correct. If the officer does not accept chief's recommendation, then it will go to the disciplinary review board. Once the review board makes their offer or recommendation to the chief can accept the disciplinary review board's offer or counter his own to the officer. And at that point, if the officer does not accept that recommendation, it then moves forward to the council for review. That's correct.
So it's still ultimately the chief that imposes the discipline. I mean, those are just being recommendations coming from, you know, either the Public Integrity Unit or the Citizens Review Board. It's still the chief. So
Correct.
I just want everybody to understand where it is in the process before we decide, you know, how much weight it's actually going to get.
Other comments or thoughts?
I have one, and it really, this may also be one to Councilwoman Masadi, so I'm just not sure how this will come across, but Diane and I have had a few conversations about that first part, probably sections 1 and 2, about swearing them in with investigative powers and designating them as a law enforcement agency.
That's not this group, Kim. This is a separate group.
Do what now?
This is not that group. We didn't talk about that group that's going to resemble the Public Integrity Unit. They jumped straight to the Disciplinary Review Board group. So that's a different group.
Well, right, but it's under your same citizens input section.
So
Right,
it is
but these
here in
people are
this-
not investigative powers, and I didn't, this was just a group that was already established by the CBA, and they were gonna just be whatever that, it just changed the makeup of that existing group. It didn't create a new group or give this group any additional powers or anything of that nature in my mind.
So Diane, is this section, first of all, Sister Henderson, is this what you're referring to?
That's what I'm referring to. That's what I'm referring to.
Diane, is this separate and apart from what we're referring to here?
They are. They're two different groups. The what I have termed as the sworn commission, Citizens Commission, is at the very beginning to receive the complaint, and they mirrored exactly what the Public Integrity Unit did. And that is all citizens. Those are 3 all citizens, not a board that is already in existence and added to. This is a brand new animal that, in order to meet the KRS statute, has to be a law enforcement agency, similar to an inspector general or some sort of, you know, entity that has sworn powers and has the ability to actually form an investigation and render a recommendation to the chief, just as the Public Integrity Unit would.
And I got that impression. And so I get that there's 2, and I don't, this isn't necessarily about adding people to the Disciplinary Review Board, which I don't have a problem with. I get that. So my questions to her had been about this first section.
Right.
These first 2 things. So and it's under the recommendations part. So do you want me to talk about it right now or not?
Good thought. Talk about, Judge Kaufman, how you disaggregated these. We do need to get resolved on the Citizens Review Board as it is separate. But let us know how you disaggregated these a little bit, Judge Kaufman.
I didn't. I didn't. This recommendation on civilian input is all Diane Manyfield's. And perhaps it needs to be divided into 2 parts, one on the SCC, Sworn Citizens Commission, and one on the DRB, the Disciplinary Review Board. That might make it clearer, but I did not disaggregate them. I just, you know, put what you all said in there. Okay,
hold the line, Henderson, please. Sister Henderson, hold the line. Let's talk about the Citizens Review Board in earnest. Diane, Sister Manyfield, where does that start? Is it the?
You had it right. You had it on that number 7.
Okay. Is that the only piece that speaks to the CRB or something of the like through here? Is that accurate?
It looks like the Disciplinary Review Board is only item number 7. Is that
Yeah,
right?
8 and 9 goes back to the Sworn Citizens Commission.
Okay.
So 7
Okay.
relates to that Discipline Review Board,
Okay.
makeup changing.
Okay.
And the reason why
So,
they was not separated and kept into the same, because they are the steps taken when a complaint is filed. Those are the
Okay.
necessary elements that a complaint follows through. They start off at the public integrity unit, which I said we will have a new sworn limited jurisdiction citizen sworn commission first, with that same mirror. So investigative powers.
Okay.
Okay.
So it sounds like we've had the discussion on the Citizens Review Board. We want specificity on how many. I think it's a very wise point that we are focusing on citizens' input, and that we should look forward to the citizens' input to be pervasive, if not majority, on that CRB. I think is what I heard.
I just want to ask about that disciplinary review board. I want to ask this question of Councilmember Masadi. Councilmember Masadi, we're a commission, not a negotiating team, and I'm more inclined to just say what we want and then put it bigger so it can be negotiated down. What's your advice on that?
I like what Judge Scorsoni said. I think we already have a benchmark with the judicial review, so why not allocate a percentage? And then maybe we even ought to think about how we're going to determine who these people are. How are they going to be chosen?
Okay, what would you recommend? Can you
well,
recommend percentages, and can you recommend methods of choosing them?
I think that 30%.
On the DRB.
Right. I think that 30% to me seems very fair. I think that sends a message that it's in reference to this. And I think we talked about this early on. I had talked to some of my colleagues when this first started, and we were hoping that each one of us could forward a name to the mayor's office from each one of our districts. That gives 12 to 15 names that the mayor can choose from, that someone at least has somewhat of an experience either in law enforcement, some type of background, maybe military, or someone that just has, a little bit more understanding of the law enforcement system.
Okay, and
So-
you, not to be nitpicky, but you say 30%. Do you mean the 33.33% that we talked about before, or?
33.33%.
Okay.
So if it's not 50 plus 1, it still stands a chance of being overran by folks that are not civilians. I mean, so if by chance we had, as we posed initially and we went away from, but if it were 3 FOP and then 3 officers, you're still gonna have the overwhelming majority
Well, the FOP has only one person now.
Right.
currently.
Can I also say something about people from the city council only appointing people who have some law enforcement background or military people? I think that would sort of be the wrong way to go. I think you need people who may be competent to read and understand policies and procedures. I think, but if you're only adding on more people who the public may perceive as being on the side of law enforcement, then what is the point of having civilian people there? We could just refer it all over to the Kentucky State Police. I think you can find people within the community. They can be recommended, they can nominate themselves, there could be some vetting process. But to suggest that only those people with a military background or a background in law enforcement would be the kind of people who could participate, I think, is not a full perspective of what might be desired by those in the community who are pushing for some civilian input.
I agree.
And I'd like to add a comment about that too. I would agree with that as well, because I think, and most citizen review boards, that work very independently and are not like add-ons, like the structure that is being proposed here, that's of something that already exists. That mostly, there's research analysts that are a part of that so that science can lead and be a part of it. There is investigators who are independent investigators who understand civil rights violations. and can focus on those types of areas, in civilian that are looking for those types of constitutional or civil rights violations. There are people that are community liaisons, who are folks that are really, a part of these impacted communities, highly, that are getting the, are feeling the impact of these kinds of situations and issues, because if those people aren't present, they can't really raise the issue. They can't really say, here's what's really happening here, and this is how we're being impacted. And so I would add on to that, I think that's a very critically important piece if you're adding something that is totally not an independent civilian review board.
That makes sense.
And I would also indicate, I'm going back to where I started, that we need to figure out where this is in the process. These people are not really doing any investigation. These people are reviewing what they received from the Public Integrity Unit. And so that backs us back up to what Ms. Beard and I have talked about, before, is that this sworn Citizens Commission, would actually be, because I honestly believe that what we receive at that disciplinary review board, and ultimately the council receives, is totally dependent on the value and the thoroughness of an investigation. And so if we don't get some citizens involved in the investigative process, then I really think what we end up with is what we almost got now, is just a rubber stamp, because they can only see what they're presented. It's like a trial de novo. You only get the record, and that's all you can really base your decision on, is what's presented to you. So if we don't get some outside thinkers, some people, in civic groups, people who can see racism a little bit clearer than people who've never experienced living in a black skin, that maybe, we may have a better presented outcome that goes to the disciplinary review board. So I just want to interject that is why I think that when we get back up to, the Sworn Citizens Involvement Group, that SCC group that I've called it, we jumped over them and went straight to the, to the disciplinary review board group. But I honestly think that I didn't put how the membership would be made up under this, but I did put it under the SCC, and I think it should mirror it. Honestly, I think the makeup should mirror, what we're trying to do is get the citizens' voice.
Let me own that for jumping down, because I've got the con on the document. So I went down there and went to Citizens Review, and it sounds like some of the characteristics and the tenets that would apply to the public integrity as well. Do we want to come to a conclusion on the CRB with 33.3 and the number, and those characteristics, and then jump back up now to the SCC?
Hey, David. Is it possible, because I know we're all here on this commission for racial justice and equity, so shouldn't there be a percentage, or should we be thinking about a percentage of the people being on this review board being Black or African American? Because who's going to look out for the Black or African American people outside of the Black and African American people?
I would think this would be permissible under other kinds of boards constituted in Kentucky. So for instance, I'm on my kid's school site-based decision-making council for school, and they're required by state law to have at least one African American.
So explicitly laying out the racial composition that we're recommending.
I think we should also point out that that could also include Chief Weathers. So it depends on whether or not you want that African American to come from the community positions or to come from the administrative side.
That was what I was going to say. For that site-based law, it actually says if your school has a certain percentage of African Americans or minorities, it's not just, then you have to have someone serving in that capacity. So it doesn't have to be someone that's Black, but like you just said, a lot of schools get by throwing someone from administration on there. Whatever we choose. I was going to go back to the number that Mr. Cozart David, you just asked. In my head, I think it needs to be 4, 3, and 2, meaning 4 from the administration, 3 from the citizens, and 2 from the FOP. If we're looking at trying to do numbers and not an even split, but that would be what I would recommend.
Why, Ms. Murphy, why, Judge Murphy, do you think we should double the number of FOP representatives on here?
I honestly don't. I was trying to, I was literally just trying to figure out a way. And I know we said to give it to the city for them to do the negotiations. I was just really just trying to make it easier for something to actually happen. My fear is that if we make the recommendation that they remain at 1, that this won't ever get done. That's the only reason why I was recommending that they at least get something. But
I don't think we recommend something we don't.
No.
I don't think we set forth a recommendation that we don't recommend.
I agree. We're not negotiators.
That's fine. I'm perfectly fine with that we leave it at 1 for the FOP. I honestly, I just want to make sure that this can get done. That's all.
Judge Murphy, have you actually been involved? You've been involved in some of these negotiations, haven't you?
I haven't. I've been in like the front discussions about things that we know need to be changed, but I've never sat there in their meetings when they actually get to the nitty gritty. I've been on the end part when we're using them for the other collective bargaining units, mainly the detention center, but I haven't. I've just given meaning when the city has to defend the city in a managerial contest. I think I just had one right before I left. We literally will make a note of things that we know need to change in the CBA for the next time that we come back for negotiations. So those are things that we pass on to the negotiating team. And I just know it's a give and take, and and it comes down. I think Lieutenant Bastian came. They what is it? Workforce balance and pay is their main thing. But yeah. So that's all. I'm fine.
As Judge Murphy, as Ms. Minifield further refines her recommendation, I think it's valuable for her, and maybe she can reach out separately to Councilmember Masadi and to the chief and to you, Judge Murphy, and find out realistically what happens at the table. Are all the police, the 5, if we said 5 from the chief's office, 1 from the FOP, and 3 citizens, are the FOP and the from the chief's office always going to be in lockstep?
It would be nice. Why can't we have civilian representation at the table? It's our money they're spending.
So
Councilmember, that's not going to fly.
Well, no, I think you can't have 2 citizens or 3 citizens and 1 FOP member. I don't think that's going to fly at all. We don't even have any citizens, so that's our whole point, to get the citizens on there. And as far as the citizens being on there, as far as the money, the council allocates the money. Ultimately, it's up to us to determine, how much each division gets allocated based on what the mayor proposes. I'm just, my feeling is that we've got to be realistic. In doing this, I think a percentage is probably the best way. Then let the negotiators hammer out what the numbers are, whether it be 2 or 3 or 1, 3, and 5, whatever, ultimately. But that we need to have a certain percentage that needs to be allocated to citizens. And that needs to be probably the most important thing, is that we need to have a citizens review board, because we don't have one now.
I'd like to know if, why the number is, the number of citizens is 3. If our goal here is to have citizens representation and you're trying to balance this out, why, I guess, why not have more citizens than anything? If that is, is it just too problematic? In that, what is the goal of the citizens' input? What are we wanting to happen with that? I think I know. I have an assumption about what I think, but I'd like to hear, what's the goal?
Well, I think
it's
that if
the-
we look at exactly what the current goal is of the disciplinary review board right now, so if
Mhm.
we get a definition of what that board is, and I will indicate that there is not a definition in the statute or the KBA as to what that board is. What they define is what that board is made of. And that's how we get our definition of who serves on that board. We know what they receive. It gets to them after a complaint has been filed against an officer, the investigation has been done by the Public Integrity Unit, and then the chief makes a recommendation, either that the employee, the officer that's charged does not accept, or if the chief feels like he needs some more information or whatever, he can then refer it to the disciplinary review board. And once it gets to them, what they receive is what the investigation detailed. And I guess their purpose at that point is to determine if that's a valid disciplinary option, what the chief has recommended, suspension or, loss in pay or whatever, or if they think that's too harsh,
Hey,
or they don't
Diane,
think it's
if I
harsh
could-
enough.
Diane, if
Yeah.
I could jump in here, the disciplinary review board does not know what chief's recommendation is. That's part of that. The recommendation stays between the officer and the chief. So therefore the board does not know, one, if there was an offer or if chief just sent it forward, or two, what that offer was. That way it's a clean slate coming in for the review board, not to be impacted by what the recommendation was. So
That makes sense. That makes
And
sense.
so what does that board then do, Chief Maynard? I mean, do they then make a recommendation on the discipline?
Yes, so then that board will meet and then get presented with the red book, so to speak, or the facts that were identified for the case, looks at what the complaint was, and then hears from the officer, and they can call other folks in or talk to other folks that are involved with this, the officers, and then they then meet after that and confer with a recommendation, and then that recommendation is presented to chief and the officer to review.
Can they choose? Can they choose which one? Can they then choose?
No,
Or they have to go with what, if it goes forward, they have to go with that?
It's chief gets the recommendation from the disciplinary review board, and then chief can decide if he or she wants to accept that or go with their recommendation, which can be higher or lesser.
But that's my point, Chief. Once the board gives chief a recommendation, then does the officer have the choice to choose?
Yes, the officer has the choice to choose chief's recommendation at that point or go to council.
Let me do some facilitating here. Because it may be I that caused the tail to wag the dog here. What Sister Minifield is telling us, she also has a more comprehensive approach to this and has citizens along the continuum. This is our this has risen to the top. We have said, yes, this is a priority, but we cannot spend the entire time on. So I'm going to do this, Diane. Let us know about the SCC, and that will actually give us, it sounds like will give us a more full picture of the continuum of citizens' participation that you've laid out.
Okay.
Here
And this is where Kimberly's gonna have some questions, and her and I have discussed this. This Sworn Citizens Commission, which I've labeled as a SEC, it's because statutorily what we've defined earlier is that it has to be a law enforcing agency. So whether or not, I tried to get a legal opinion from the law department, as to whether or not they believe that this can actually develop. Can the mayor, actually appoint a separate and distinct law enforcing agency and give it limited jurisdiction and to investigate external complaints against the police and swear it in and give it the same basic investigative tools and powers that the Public Integrity Unit has. And that means that they're going to have to be able to have access to 911 records. They're going to have body cam information. They're going to have to be able to be full-fledged investigators. So I indicated that will have to be an MOU with the FOP, you know, to let us have access, let this group of 3 have access to that in order to make a thorough and complete investigation. And I put that the makeup of this group should come from each council district. Each council district should be able to appoint 1 person, you know, and then depending on what sector that the complaint arises from, if it arises from the sector, you know, council district 5, then that council district 5 representative should be the one that is part of the 3 that actually hears it and does the investigation forward. And that this group of 12, you know, that is going to be a full group of 12 broken down investigative wise by a panel of 3, depending on which sector comes through with the actual complaint, that this group should be, you know, encouraged to be made up of local civics groups like the NAACP, the Urban League. You know, those people should have some ability to have representation on this group. And so, so that's how I get with the makeup of it. And then you get to whether, you know, what actual things they're going to be allowed to investigate. And that's that general order. And that's where Kimberly and I had several discussions about, you know, how does that look? And so, but I think the first question is, one, are we legally going to be able to get the mayor to appoint this kind of a, you know, mirror, and someone that's going to mirror the public integrity unit and have all the same responsibilities and duties of that public integrity unit? And like I say, I tried to get a opinion from the law department, and I didn't necessarily get an opinion on that, but we did talk about whether or not this group could have subpoena powers. And because I ended up taking that out because I don't want them to have anything over and above what the public integrity unit already has. And if the public integrity unit does not have subpoena power, which I was told they do not, you know, then this group should not have it as well, you know. So I wanted them to mirror. But I also, as when I did the makeup of that group, I didn't want it to look like a clone of the public integrity unit. I didn't want it to look like we just, you know, got a group of citizens that look identical to the police public integrity unit. I wanted it to look like the citizens. And I wanted it to, that's why I said it should have come from Urban League, NAACP, LGBT community. You know, those groups should have, you know, some priority in selection. So, but that's where I am on that group. And they do their investigation. They mirror exactly what the public integrity unit does. And they submit their investigation conclusion to the chief, just like the public integrity unit does. The chief then has 2 investigations in front of him. They may say the exact same thing, or they may say totally different things. And then he then decides how he proceeds and gets us back down to that disciplinary review board or not. So, but that is the initial recommendation, that the complaint starts off with this, what I've termed SCC group.
Questions, comments?
Okay, so is this
Councilwoman?
where I jump in?
This is
Oh,
you.
that's right.
Waving
I'm
to-
sorry. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, Councilwoman. Sister Henderson had began her comment before, so.
That's okay. So I guess this is kind of where my question comes in. So where Diane and I have had a few long conversations actually about this, where I'm thinking kind of along the road that I could see some potential legal department discussions and council discussions, one about the mayor's ability to even do this. And part of her and I conversation was what they would investigate and how with respect to public integrity unit, because they don't issue subpoenas. And so this group would, public integrity unit can do search warrants. Does this group will, who would be involved in the training, who would be involved in, so for example, if there was a complaint against this group for whatever, harassment, because, you know, police will run into situations where the person don't want to talk to them, those types of things. But if they were sued or whatever, where does that fall under, you know, kind of their legal, the city's legal obligation towards this group? You know, and if it's a criminal investigation, the police can come and request a grand jury subpoena from our office, but not on a civil kind of thing. Sometimes it has to be a court order for certain mental records to be reviewed in camera. So there's a lot of things that go in the background of this. And so that was why I was asking, so where my question was coming about that is how, if we really want this to happen, how much information or detailed or whatever do we need to bring or give to the council, or just say we want this and let legal decide if this is possible or not, and then they say no and we call it a day, if you understand what I'm saying. Because I just see a lot of things going on in the background that legal may have an issue with, and they may have to consult with us on. So I just didn't know from Councilwoman how much more than these 2 lines do we need to put in there?
Well, I'm just going to be honest with you. I think it's going to be a tough sell, what you're talking about with the second group. Our advocate in the city doesn't even have subpoena powers. So I think this is going to be a real reach. My feeling is we focus on the Citizens Review Board, making sure that we get either 2 or 3 spots on that Citizens Review Board. To me, that's the most important that we focus on. I think the other will be very difficult to implement. We'll have not only issues with law, but just the training involved to get the right kind of people on this. And then you're asking about, subpoena power, and you're asking about getting information. That's going to be a tough thing to be able to complete. So my focus would be, let's just focus on the Citizens Review Board, get a certain percentage on there that's going to be able to, mirror what we're talking about, getting a citizen on there with their eyes and ears and be able to make a recommendation. That's what I think that's the whole thing is about myself.
Well, can I ask a question? Wouldn't that also kind of mirror what would be the point if it mirrors, if the public integrity unit is going to be looking at the same information? Without doubt, they're going to see it differently, probably. So
exactly.
Then how do you resolve that? I think that it could possibly create a bigger mess.
Right. Well, I think the question became is that we initially started this conversation because the public wanted some ability for other eyes other than the police to police the police. And so that's why this conversation came up. And so we want the ability, and I have no doubt in my mind that what this SCC group delivers to the police may be totally different than what the public integrity unit delivers to the chief. But at the end of the day, statutorily, it's still the chief that's going to make the ultimate call. All this is doing is giving the citizens a right to at least look at it. And I don't doubt that, and we backed off that subpoena power, Councilman Masadi, because I don't want this group to have anything greater than what already exists for the public integrity unit. But I also don't want them to, not be able to do their job. If the public integrity unit's going to be able to talk to officers, interview officers, and look at body cam footage, I think this group should be too. And I'm going to mirror to what Professor Price says. I don't think we need to start micromanaging whether these people are qualified or not. I mean, one, they shouldn't want to serve if they didn't think that they could do the job. And 2, I think that we should be skilled enough to understand that we don't want to just create a clone of the police department by putting ex-police, ex-military, and those sort of people. We want citizens. We want people who want to go next door and knock on the door and see if they can get somebody to answer a question. And they may be able to get more out of their community than these public integrity unit people are. You just
so this
get
is
a
the
little
citizens. I'm sorry, Sister Minfield. This is the citizens' input recommendation.
This is all citizens. These 3 people, or a
And-
total of 15 people, 3 that's actually doing the investigation, are all citizens. They're not flanked on any side by a member of the Metro Police Department. They're all citizens. They're gonna, like we're all citizens, we're gonna issue a recommendation to the mayor. And we were appointed and chosen because, not that we have some great expertise in something, but that we can read and write. Professor Price says, and we kind of know how to, what we're looking for and what, just as my grandmother used to say, it doesn't smell right, So if this group can figure out what's not smelling right, and maybe the public integrity unit doesn't get that.
So what we're seeking to do, and I want to remind us, we do want to be realistic, but I want to remind us we're going to be ambitious, and we are seeking to undo systemic racism that's been here for a period of time because we've done things for a period of time the same way we've done them. If it's about citizens' input, I think we ought to be comfortable with our recommendations of setting forth something that is prominently citizens' input. So here's what I'm going to do to move us, and Judge Kaufman, I'm going to let you walk us forward. We've given insights, and Diane, if you would, where you and Kim have had conversation, where you need to have additional conversation, any modifications that you may want to make to that based on the insights given today, if you would do that. But I want us to and I think there's been plenty that has been there, but I want to remind us that we knew this was going to be asking things that were going to discomfort and reshape and reform what we're doing. Otherwise, we have been in an exercise of futility. So, and I don't want us to go to a deficit approach and, well, let's figure out what they may or may not accept. Let's go by from all the expertise and experience and hard work that's been put in by this committee, promising practices that have been studied, policies and disparities that you looked at, and let's make our recommendation.
David, if I may jump in here. We have spent 1 hour on this. It's 5 o'clock right now. This is not gonna, we cannot do this. And so I think in the interest of wrapping up part of this, we need to hear 2 or 3 things. One, we need to hear if anybody believes this should not be a high priority. 2, we need to hear if anybody is opposed to what Ms. Minifield has recommended on the disciplinary review board and sending it forward. And then 3, we need to hear if anybody is opposed to sending forward this sworn citizens committee aspect of this. And so could we hear, because I can't really see everybody's hands. So in terms of priority, is there anyone who disagrees? Thank you. Is there anyone who disagrees that this is a high priority? Anybody? Okay. And is there anyone then on the DRB, the Disciplinary Review Board, is there anybody who disagrees that we should make that recommendation? It's okay, be honest. Okay. Is there anybody who disagrees on the Sworn Citizens Commission recommendation?
I've got a question that I'd like for some clarification, and I'm not saying I'm for it and I'm against it. But
okay, could I just see though, before you asked your question, I saw Judge Scorsoni's hands that as disagreeing. I saw Ms. Queen's hands that disagreeing. I saw Ms. Masadi's hands that disagrees. I saw Ms. Pursley disagreeing. I saw Chief Maynard disagreeing. I saw Ms. Baird disagreeing. I saw Judge Isaac disagreeing. And I saw Sheriff Witt disagreeing. Did I catch everybody? Oh, and Ms. Gunther disagrees. Okay, so I don't know how many we have on the committee, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people disagreeing with this Sworn Citizens Committee going forward for whatever reason. So I guess my question is, should we focus on the DRB because it is a high priority, and maybe not make the Sworn Citizens Committee part of our recommendation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 17. It looks like 18 people, so half disagree with taking it forward. Chief Maynard, what were you going to ask?
So I wanted to ask Ms. Queen, because it's the Disciplinary Review Board and the citizens, 2 or 3 put on that. That's separate than the SEC, which to me, Ms. Queen, sounds like it's an end around to a Citizens Review Board. Is everything that is laid out in the SEC recommendation, would you consider that a Citizens Review Board itself? based on your knowledge.
Are you saying that, okay, are you, if it's you're talking about the disciplinary review board, and adding those additional people? You're talking about the citizens?
The Sworn Civilians Commission that
Okay,
Diana just spoke about. To me,
okay,
that sounds exactly like what a citizens review board is, and I can understand where law would be hesitant of giving any recommendation, because I think the only input, and I think Diane, correct me, is this your thought as well, that it would be by making them a law enforcement agency? Is that the point where you felt that would surpass the requirement for KRS to be changed for a citizens review board to be allowed to happen in Lexington? Is that correct?
That is correct. And I will answer your question. I talked to Ms. Queen's organization, that National Association of Citizens Review Board, and and sent them my recommendation about this. They were they had a lot of questions, about, they knew we were going to get some pushback from the FOP. And she does tell me that they are, there's multiple models of what a citizens review board looks like. And a citizens review board, different models, some investigate, some just review at the backside, so there are, some do a combination. We had this discussion over what an actual citizens review board looks like. And to answer your question, this could technically fit the definition of a citizens review board, but because citizens review board is such a broad topic and has such different impacts and different meanings, but this could definitely fit a citizens review board definition of an investigative citizens review board.
I apologize.
And it's pre-disciplinary, so.
I apologize, but I'm gonna jump in one more time. In the interest of moving forward for this aspect, Ms. Minifield, you've heard the pros and cons. I would recommend that you refine what you have on the DRB and that you modify as you think appropriate the SCC portion of this, that you separate the two, and then we can bring it back up Thursday and see if there's more support or less opposition for going forward with the SCC. And but that's just one part of this whole citizens review business. So let's move forward and look at everything else too.
Judge Kaufman,
yes.
Judge Kaufman, let me just say real quickly, there are 17 on this committee. I think you counted Quinn, there's 17. So for the purposes of consensus building,
it's over.
15 of us, there were 15 on the committee proper outside of you and I.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So I believe that the citizens, I believe that the citizens, Foreign Citizens Commission is off. So I mean, because for me to have some direction, I think that based on the vote that's just been taken, that we need to move away from that and just go with.
All I'm saying is to move this agenda forward today, you modify as you see fit. And if you think the SCC should come completely off, then take it off. If you think you can modify it and work with Councilmember Asadi, she has kind of a good handle on what will work and won't. But
well, no, I think it's a vote. I think it's a majority rule on this commission. Okay. I don't want to just be a single solitary vote.
I'll leave that to your discretion, but we've now spent almost an hour and 10 minutes of a 90-minute meeting on this.
And Diane, you have thoughts, so please share those. You and Diane.
Absolutely.
Diana Queen has thoughts, so y'all share those.
And if
we've talked. I've talked to everybody.
If there's any modification of any recommendations, we would like to have it by close of business tomorrow so that everybody can see it. Now, that's one portion of this this citizen input into police discipline. The first portion was that recommendation on transparency in the disciplinary procedures. Can we look at that? Can we look at that portion, please, Mr. Cozart? That's the first portion under police discipline. There are, remember, 5 components here for the citizen input into police discipline. I would point out the 5th one is do a study looking at varying civilian oversight models. So that may be where you want to put the SCC. Okay, there, the transparency. Now, first of all, we've all agreed citizen input is a high priority. And we have this without going into detail in our discussion. You can see it. You had this since this morning at 11, and I want to know, is there anybody who disagrees with going forward with this recommendation? Take a look at it. Okay, can you speak up if you disagree with going forward with this recommendation as a part of citizen input?
I have a question.
Okay, what kind of modifications? I don't hear anybody disagreeing. What kind of modifications should we make, Ms. Queen?
Just what is commitment? You know, I mean, commitment to publicize. I just would like clarification on that, please, what that means.
So you think the recommendation should clarify that, right?
Yes, I like to know what commitment means.
Can you, without getting into detailed discussion here today, can you make suggestions to Ms. Minifield for those clarifications?
Yes, or I can ask a question to that. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments about what needs to be done to that first recommendation, that first part of this recommendation on citizen input?
Are you talking about the down through 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and
Through
5?
5. This is
Okay.
the first part, the transparency, and without getting into a substantive discussion. Is
And
there?
I'm not. I will reach out to Ms.
Should do.
I will reach out to Ms. Minifield. I believe the Sikh General Assembly to eliminate the gag rule, that needs to be expounded on. It can't just be, it needs to be more detailed on what the city can do on that part.
What other comments do you have that Ms. Minifield needs to look at? Anything else?
There's
Okay.
just one little typo. It says civilian liaison.
Oh,
It
we'll
should-
deal with, we'll deal.
Yeah,
Yeah. we'll
just
deal
want to
with
make
that
sure.
later. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
Then let's move on then to the third of 5 under citizen input. And the third of 5 is Public Integrity Unit complaints. And that is Ms. Persley's recommendation. This is all still under the heading of citizen input. That's to clarify the guidance of what to expect when you file a complaint. Is there anyone who, and this is not all the detail is somewhere else in her recommendation, and you have that. Is there anyone who thinks this should not be a part of this recommendation? Anybody? Okay. Is there anybody who thinks that, okay, well, let's look at the next one.
Judge
Citizen-
Kaufman,
Yes.
Councilwoman Masadi had her hand up.
Okay, Councilmember Masadi.
I jumped to the second one. I didn't mean to go that. I'm on Citizens Liaison right now.
Citizens Liaison. This is not, now, Ms. Persley and I've had a conversation this weekend. This is not the citizens advocate. We have a citizens advocate with the city who is specifically prohibited from getting involved with investigations of police. And so what Ms. Persley is recommending here is a person named Citizens Liaison located within the Commissioner of Public Safety office who would help people file complaints outside of the Public Integrity Unit. Is there anybody who doesn't think this is a recommendation we should make? Ms. Minifield.
I have a question. So is that conflicting with the previous one where the Public Integrity Unit is going to provide transparent guidance? I mean, are they different?
The
Well,
difference,
she's talking about 2 different methods of filing complaints. Right now, you have to go to the Public Integrity Unit and file one. This would be somebody who doesn't want to file one with the Public Integrity Unit. So the Citizens Liaison would assist citizens in filing the complaint outside the Public Integrity Unit, but it still would get back to the same place. Right, Ms. Persley?
that's correct.
So we're not trying to take the complaint process away from the police department. We're just adding an additional place where you can file a complaint. We're not going to house them all in one facility and one person and one agency.
Additional avenue, that's right. Now, the detail on her recommendation talks about analysis and reports and all that, but this is the nucleus of it right here.
All of which are in the repository.
Right.
Laura has uploaded the unabridged recommendations.
Any objection to this fourth part of the citizen input going forward? Okay, let's move on. And the last one is, sorry, somebody said something.
Judge,
That's me. Is this going to be a paid position? Because that's something we need to know. Who is this going to be? A volunteer position? This is going to be a paid position? I hate to ask these questions, but the budget is crucial on this kind of thing.
Paid.
I think it's paid, and I think it could be combined with duties that are already existing.
Can you specify that in your recommendation?
I can do that.
Okay, just to say you think it should be paid and what duties it can be combined with, because I think the council will need to know it when they consider this.
Okay.
They have to.
Yeah.
That question will come up on a lot of this as far as funding, you know, and if it's a recurring position, how are we going to put as far as the funding? No question.
Okay. Number 5 under citizen input is a recommendation. It's a long-term study. This, Diana Queen made this early, that we create an ad hoc voluntary exploratory committee comprised of community members, special emphasis on Black, Brown, American, Latino, and international communities to study varying models and recommend the best fit for Lexington. Does anybody disagree this is a priority? And does anybody disagree with this going forward? Obviously, this is a long-term thing and would not have any budgetary impact, I guess, right, Ms. Queen?
That's correct, not initially.
Okay. Any objection to that?
Where's the data come from? That just, I mean, like, it just
Well,
seems so overly broad.
if you look, you know, this is deliberate because I had to have a summary document. If you look at her initial email about this, I think Ms. Queen talked about that agency that Ms. Minifield has already talked with, among other things. And so maybe you could add some links to about that, Ms. Queen.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, yes.
Isn't that what we're doing? I mean, are we not this ad hoc group trying to figure out how to, you know, have some citizens oversight?
Well, I mean,
Exactly my question.
I know that it, and I have appreciation for that, and I do, and but I'm saying in the, you know, technically when you see a citizens review board, there's a process, and that process has lots of the community members, and I'm talking about lots of lay community members that are engaged in the process. So there's a specific way that goes about. So that's what this speaks to.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have an objection to it, but it just seems like to me that we're doing one more thing to get somebody to study something, and when we are all here trying to do that thing that they're going to.
Mm-hmm. Well, this normally takes about a year and a good year to go through a process, maybe even a year and a half to go through. And again, as Judge Kaufman indicated, it's a long-term piece because it's kind of a thoughtful, methodical process, and so that's what it's about.
You know, when Ms. Minifield, when you first talked about this, you talked about some had varying degrees of success, and Dr. Potter said the same thing, and Ms. Queen said the same thing, and so she said, you know, let's do this study, and I said, isn't that what we're doing? And I think she thinks that it needs to be somebody who spends more time researching and studying than we have.
Yeah, and I will tell you that when I talk to the group that she's, you know, affiliated with, that the ones that have the most success and have the best teeth behind them are the ones that statutorily mandated, you know. And when you're trying to get something in legislator on a ballot box or something like that, it's going to take years. So it is not something that's going to come out of this group, you know, right. Because we are just trying to find a solution for the right now.
Now, but I want to repeat, is there anybody who thinks this portion of the citizen input should be left out? Okay. All
I
right,
would
now,
hate to see that the city jump on that and ignore everything that we're suggesting. So if that gives them an out to not do anything that we're suggesting and say, oh, we're studying, I would vote against it. Because I'm
Okay.
tired of
it's-
people saying we're studying.
yeah,
It's not all or nothing. And the super committee, when remembering this committees will be combined with 3 other committees as well. And there are other committees that are proposing some iteration of something ongoing to continue to monitor this work. So I don't, that's a good thought because that tactic has been used to just
Yeah.
look at one wart and throw the whole thing out. But this is not all or nothing, and that's up to us as committee chairs and the super committee chair to monitor any of those tactics.
And I would also say that I don't want that to happen either. I certainly don't want that to be some out, in any way. I'm only.
wait just a minute. I want to halt this because we have other things. We have another very high priority item that we haven't even talked about, and that's body worn cameras. So let me skip over that right now. I agree that's a good substantive discussion, but we're going to have to work toward closure here. The last 4 items on police discipline include officers file, anti-retaliation policy, not hiring officers who've been dismissed, and problem officers. I would say let's table the discussion on those and move on, please, to body worn cameras. We can come back to those later, but in my estimation, this is another very high priority item. So I would start the discussion by asking this question. Is there anyone who disagrees that this is a high priority item? Please speak up because I can't see y'all. Okay. All right, so it's a high priority item. Now, the first recommendation we ever got was the first one. And I only put it in there because Brianna personally recommended it, but it was rendered unnecessary. And so we don't have to talk about it. But what we do have to talk about is what Denotra Gunther has given us 11 recommendations, I think, some short-term, some long-term. And if we all agree that that is a high priority, then can you look at it and point to the problems the recommendation has that need to be worked out before we come back on Thursday? Yeah, Councilmember Masadi.
I think, make sure that you can hear me. The issue with the detectives wearing the body cameras is going to be difficult because there are some cases, especially when you're dealing with maybe an abuse case or something of that nature, that detective's not going to want that camera on when they're talking to either witnesses or maybe the victim itself. So that's going to have to be maybe be a little bit more specific. That's a concern of mine.
Which one is that, Councilwoman? Which one is that?
Actually, I can respond to that.
We should be looking at the addendum, David, because the addendum is where we have the latest version of the body worn camera recommendation, and I just didn't get it. So now we have it.
Councilwoman Masadi, there are actually policies and procedures in place. Well, first of all, it's the mayor's desire that every sworn officer is going to have a body worn camera. That would include some civilians and all your detectives. And I believe that she just had a press conference on the 11th of August where they're going to apply for a grant to try to get the rest of the sworn officers body worn cameras.
Right.
But there's also
173
procedure
more
in place where when you have a hesitant witness, they can turn the camera away and they still capture the audio. But we've got to get out of that discretion where they can say it was because I had a hesitant witness, so I'm going to interrupt the body cam. And also, there is, even in the police department's policies and procedures, it says that you don't have to disclose that you are recording it. Now they ask you, you have to say, yes, I'm recording, but you don't have to lead with that. So, and I understand hesitant witnesses and victims, but you don't have to show their face on the camera, but we need the audio, because what is better in a sworn statement if you have audio to back up a written statement? That's the best evidence. So
Yeah.
I can't, the police department has accounted for that.
Okay, Chief
And
Maynard,
just
give
to
me
be
your
clear,
input
just
on
to
that.
be
would you?
clear, those, none of those on the original law enforcement recommendation summary are now current. Everything on body worn cameras from Ms. Gunther is 1 through 11 on the addendum, right, Ms. Gunther?
It is correct.
Okay.
And that should be up now.
Yeah, it
Okay.
is. Any other areas of concern on this that she needs to look at and tweak?
I haven't had a chance to look at this. I think this came in late, but I'm seeing one I do have a question on real quick.
Yes.
The number 5, where it says decrease officer discretion to turn off or not activate the body worn camera on the basis of officer safety. That I, of all people, will tell you, I want that camera on. The officers want that camera on. But if an officer is jumping out and it's the decision between getting on the radio and letting them know where they're at, the dispatch where they're at, and drawing their weapon, those are the 2 priorities. The body worn camera comes on as soon as possible. So I think be cautious on that recommendation to decrease officer discretion for officer safety. There's going to be times where they cannot turn the camera on because they're doing 4 things at once with 2 hands.
Well, and actually, there's another recommendation that could possibly take care of that, because right now the policy and procedure is for the officer to have the body worn camera in buffering mode, and then they switch it to event mode. Why can't that be switched? Because even in your policies and procedures, you say that the battery can record up to 12 hours in event mode. That covers the whole shift. So why don't they just have it in event mode? They don't have to worry about switching it. And then they could go to buffering mode when they're having lunch, using the bathroom, or doing whatever. Because the concern is that the safety, when there's a safety issue, that's when we need the body worn camera video most.
So you're saying you want the camera to be recording the entire shift? That
Yeah.
the officers by themselves be recording?
Yes.
Okay.
So not only when they come into contact with citizens, they want to be recorded even outside of citizens in interaction.
They can go to buffering if they're on a break or whatever, but if they're on the city's time and they're actually performing law enforcement duties, instead of having to make the decision, because it's a life and death situation, it's a quick decision, and they have to decide to live as opposed to switching on the body cam, and the body cam is what's going to ultimately be needed at the end of this, just have it in event mode.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you from somebody who has to watch body cam, it is hard. It is boring and it is long. So if I'm watching an 8-hour shift trying to, look and see when some interaction occurred, that's going to be awful. But
the end user has the ability to redact that dead space, Diane. They have the ability. There are people in the department that have the authority to redact certain things.
Well, I think the county attorney's office, and I'm sure the Commonwealth attorney's office, get unredacted body cam. So, and Kimberly can
Isn't
speak
there
to
an
that.
issue about the cost of storing all that for whatever length of time? I think that's one of the big monetary issues, isn't it, Chief?
Yeah, it is.
It is. The storage is absolutely the cost. And then the other question I had real quick is the number 6, the increased graduated discipline. What are the recommendations for that?
Well, I believe that if an officer continually forgets to activate his body cam, that termination should be a consideration. Right now, the max is 3-day suspension. Well, he can go through not activating his body cam, and just end up with, 3-day suspension after the 3rd time. So he can just do that for life and just get 3-day suspension at the most. There needs to be.
I think one thing that Chief Maynard is saying is, can you put specific recommendations in there?
I just said that at some point it needs to be, termination needs to be considered, but they have a whole thing about discipline. There's a whole general order on that. And, the look back time. And I've, even said that if it's for the same offense, that the 5-year look back needs to be, done away with. But I didn't put a recommendation about how many times they get to not activate their body cam, because it could be one time if there is a serious event and it's not captured.
I have a suggestion for an amendment of this policy, Ms. Gunther, and
Yes,
that
ma'am.
is, if you look over in monitoring and accountability,
Yes,
my recommendation on reports and analyses,
yes.
I put down a use assessment and report on body worn cameras, and I have some detail on that.
It's in
And
there.
is it on here to
Yes,
make?
ma'am. Your recommendation is in there. It's one of the
Okay.
11.
Okay, and to make a quarterly report to the Planning and Public Safety Committee on that?
Yes, I believe that the second time you came back was quarterly. I believe the first recommendation you had was monthly.
Oh, monthly. Okay, okay, good, better. Okay, well, that's the only thing. And I have to say it's almost 5:30. So I'm going to take that part out of my recommendation and leave it in yours. Now, I would make this recommendation for what we do between now and Thursday. If you look over these summaries and if you see somewhere in which someone should change his or her recommendations, please shoot that person a note and say, please consider being more specific here, or please consider deleting this, and here's why. And then please do that please do that tonight. And then if anybody wants to modify your recommendations, we would ask that you do that by close of business tomorrow and shoot it to us, and I can do a whole new summary for Thursday's meeting. On Thursday, again, we've already said these two areas are specifically high priorities, and we know that. So those will definitely be going forward in some form. On Thursday, we'll be talking about the other recommendations, and we just are past the point of getting into substantive discussions on much of anything at this point. We have to have the end in mind. Thursday's our very last meeting. And so we have to, David and I are going to be creating a report starting tomorrow and seeing what it looks like. And it has to be something in it. So if you would get those modified recommendations by tomorrow afternoon, by close of business. If anybody, let's see, I see a note from Dr. Price. Would it be possible to link the names of the person to whom we should contact about changes for the section? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
They should be in the repository or in your email. In the
your
repository, they should be linked.
Yeah, I can, if you have a question about who made the recommendations, you can shoot David and me an email or Laura. Laura knows that repository better than we do, and she can tell you to whom you should address it. So
Justice has those already.
I'm sorry?
Justice recommendation summary has those already.
Right.
Linked to a person.
Right, they do. Okay, all right. Well, we're just past our time. We will meet Thursday at 3:00, and we will try to give you closer to a final report because we have to get that done. Okay.
The other thing, Judge, please know that while you're reviewing these, if there are any glaring gaps,
oh, that's
you need
right.
to identify them and have a recommendation on those gaps to us by COB tomorrow.
Yeah, please. And
if you identify any gaps.
Ms. Gunther just said, please shoot her the proposed changes to her recommendations so she can incorporate if she thinks that's a good idea. So by close of business tonight, you need to tell people what they need to do to change their recommendations. By close of business tomorrow, we want gaps in our recommendations, and we also want the modified recommendations. And we'll be moving through these a lot more quickly on Thursday. Okay, we'll see everybody Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.